Hello everyone and welcome back once again to ThursDev. I'm your host Luke, and today I'm going to possibly crush your hopes and dreams. Not that it's a thing that I want to do, that's the last thing that I hope for with any of my videos, but today I felt like I had to get real with you about the games market because somebody needs to. As you may be aware, I approach these videos from the perspective of somebody teaching about game development as a career. This pertains to everyone that wishes to release a game commercially, whether in a studio or otherwise, but particularly for those of you who want to make a living off of Gamedev. So here it is. Your game maybe, honestly probably, won't be a hit. As a matter of fact, statistically, your game will probably perform worse than you expect, and once again statistically, almost certainly not as well as you hope. I hate to have to say that, and there are always exceptions to the rule, but I want you to be ready for it when it happens. You've no doubt heard a lot of people talking about things like market saturation, visibility, demographics, and so on, but how really, truly aware are you of their meanings? I'd like to give you a bit of a primer on these concepts today, and what you can expect as far as game sales are concerned. If you haven't watched it already, I encourage you to take a look at the video I did a few months back about the Week 1 sales cliff to get an idea of the sales patterns for premium commercial games before we begin. It's not required viewing, but that's most likely the first big shock that, as someone who might not entirely be familiar with game sales patterns, you're likely to experience. In North America, we often use the term marketing to be interchangeable with PR, but today we're going to be doing some actual proper marketing, which is to say analysis of our product market and forecasting based off of it. Let's start with looking at market saturation. The indie renaissance and the low barrier to entry for development on mobile platforms have made it, in the past few years, significantly less difficult to get your game in front of people. Since the early 2010s, the number of video game releases has been steadily climbing, as more and more hobbyists are given the tools necessary to put their games up on high-profile marketplaces like Steam. You may or may not have already heard this statistic, but during 2016, 4,207 games were released on Steam. That's 38% of all games on the entire platform released in 1 year. We're only just over halfway through April now in 2017. A quarter of the way through the year, and already a little over 1,300 games have been released. Looking at Steam's new releases list, there are 41 games listed as having come out on April 18th alone. Yooka-Laylee, a high-profile release that happened just last week, is now on the 7th page of new releases on Steam. There are 25 items per page. That's what we call market saturation. There are so many games coming out constantly that the likelihood of your game being seen is significantly smaller than it was even a year or 2 years ago. Even high-profile titles like Yooka-Laylee, Bayonetta, which also recently came out on Steam, Telltale's Guardians of the Galaxy, and Planescape Torment Enhanced all get buried in the torrent of games, and though I'd know to look for those games because I was aware of them, what would happen if I didn't already know about your game when I went to find something new to play on Steam? Your best bet for getting seen is if your game's one of the last released on a Friday, since Steam doesn't release games on weekends apparently, where you'll stay on top of that list far longer. But that's not even a guarantee. But hey, at least then some people will get the chance to know that your game came out. I'll be talking about advertising, PR, and generating visibility for your game next week, but for now, let's just think about the concept of visibility in general. When you release a game, as we've seen, the chance of just being found organically is significantly smaller now than it ever has been. We can't rely on people just finding our game, even if it's the best game ever released if nobody knows about it. This is why we need to do PR and advertising for our games. This is why marketing has become synonymous with those things, because in order for a game to sell and to get into the headspace of those people who are most likely to purchase it, you need to pimp that game out as much as humanly possible, using whatever channels you have available to you to get people thinking about your game. You can artificially create interest because you can no longer rely on organic visibility. A wise mentor of mine once told me that for a premium game with guaranteed shelf space, you'll likely still end up spending about 500 yen for every copy of a game that you want to sell. That translates out to about $450 in US dollars. This of course is a significantly more traditional market and includes things like magazine ads, billboard space in Akihabara Station and what have you. But even if the value changes, the principle is that user acquisition through advertising costs money. On the magnitude of dollars per copy, at times something in the range of 10% of your game's retail value is sunk in creating visibility for your game. If you have a budget for it, then you absolutely should be ready to expend that budget. Not to say that all visibility costs money. Reddit, though generally hostile to self-promotion, still responds well to funny video game videos, for example, as evidenced by the slowly growing eyes on Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. Facebook and Twitter should absolutely be leveraged, and there are other free venues for advertising your game, but you better be ready to commit to it full-time and know who to advertise to. Demographics is the study of groups of people. Put oversimply, you should absolutely know who your market is. If you're marketing a point-and-click adventure game, though there may very well be FPS players who also enjoy them, you should be looking at the adventure game market. Your game, whether you like labels or not, fits into a number of boxes that limits and defines its audience. If your game has anime-style graphics, that's one group that it'll resonate with and another that it'll alienate. If it's a narrative RPG, that's another group that it'll resonate with and another that it'll alienate. It's up to you to know the size of those markets and what they respond to. Although there's no one truly accurate way of gauging your player base, business intelligence sites like Steam Spy give us a method of understanding, through creative searching, how our Venn diagrams work out. Find games similar to the one that you'll be releasing and look at how many copies they sold. Compare their advertising with your own to understand how much more or less you should expect due to visibility. And make some assumptions. If you're extremely lucky, and I mean extremely, maybe you will have a hit on your hands and that would be amazing. But for every runaway hit like Stardew Valley or Undertale, there are hundreds of games that you've never even heard of that are quite possibly just as good. But we may never know because the market is fickle and difficult to manipulate. Next week, I'm attempting to dragoon John into helping me with an episode on actual advertising and social media plans, but you've had your primer. Nothing will truly give you an infallible projection as to what your sales will look like, but at least through proper market analysis and marketing of your product, you'll know what to expect and where to advertise, and how much you need to spend to advertise effectively. Thank you for watching this week's episode of ThursDev, and I hope that you found it entertaining and educational, or at least one of those things. And that you'll consider joining us again next time, as we're rounding up on the final stretch in our Make Your Game series. If you're interested in joining our little community of enthusiasts that enjoy both playing and the making of games, then do feel free to hit subscribe to get informed of our new videos. Also join us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. We're not pushing social media that hard, but we're certainly there. Thank you once again, and I hope that I'll see you next time. Take care.